Well, one of the things that we learn with Dhamma practice is that adversity is something we can welcome. So, as you're listening to my voice, as you're listening to my voice, and if it starts to crackle or echo or fades or you can't hear me, then that's your practice. That's the Dhamma arising. And often we can, when we're learning about Dhamma practice and we're trying to understand what it is that the Buddha was teaching so long ago, but as we're so lucky is still being taught today, is that we can have a sense that we're wanting to become peaceful and not really troubled or bothered. And that can come out of a sense of the fact that peace is really something that we learn to enjoy, we learn to welcome, because for a lot of us, our minds are not peaceful, our experience is not peaceful. We have to deal with a lot of things going on at once, difficult emotions, problems with our relationships with others, fears around what the things that are happening in the world, changes, and so we're searching for a way to experience some peace, some relief from that. And so when we feel that peace, when we have a sense of that, there is a sense of relief, whether it's momentary relief or just like, oh right, there's something possible other than my some of these intense experiences that we can have, or the many shifting qualities of our moods. But it's interesting because what Dhamma practice is really teaching us is being okay with all of those things, rather than a sense of sometimes, well, if I just feel peace, then I get away from those things. And so there can be a very deep learning that can go on when we begin to welcome many difficult things that we experience. When we are first practicing, though, there's sort of a learning curve that needs to occur, because at first it's not so easy to maintain that quality of mind where we're focused or we're able to experience that peace. And so it can take quite a long time. And so one of the first qualities of the meditation is a sense of wanting to push away or to get away from, or I'm only okay in these certain conditions. So for many of you who've first learned about the Buddha's teaching, sometimes this was in a retreat environment. And that can be the sense of, oh, okay, this is where things really work. This is where I can really settle my mind. And while that's true, we have to be aware of all of the kind of conditions we try to set up as a crutch. You're having a crutch or two crutches because you need them at first. You need them for your mind. But when somebody's broken a leg or harmed themselves in some way, they need crutches, then the goal is not to have crutches your entire life. And so what you can think about is your mind. Many of us, we're all born with different karmic propensities. So you've heard of some teachers who seem to have had very quick results, for example. And that might just be a lot of work that they've done in their past life, or it could be work they've done in their current life. So it's not usually helpful to compare ourselves to that. Why me? Why my karma? Or why can't it be easy for me to get this? But we do want to have a sense of long-term learning and eventually welcoming adverse conditions. So, for example, I'm not sure how choppy I was during the guided meditation, but as we were trying to figure out what was going on with the Zoom here, my mind immediately went to, oh, what's wrong? And, oh, I should have figured this out before, and why is it like this? And we just got Starlink, but it's also not good enough. So everything really has that sense of a not good enough quality. It's very normal in what we experience. So whether even those times when we are setting up conditions that are so easy for ourselves, that are a lot easier, I'll say, something like a retreat, or we go into a meditation room and we don't have a lot of perturbances or difficulties. We sort of shut down our senses to a particular way. And even in that, there can be this sense of dissatisfaction, like it's just not warm enough, it's not cold enough, oh no, there's a breather in the room here, I have to listen to somebody else's breathing in addition to my own, and whatever it is, there's some quality of it not being right. And so the trick is to not be very fooled by that, to thinking that, well, if I'll just get the conditions right, then I'll be peaceful. And it's quite easy to move into that habit of mind throughout your day. It's not just in meditation, but it's how you approach, when you meet somebody, or the particular timing. I was right before I was setting up this meeting. I was getting a lot of things together, and there were some people outside, and immediately what came to my mind is like, don't like, want to get away from, not because the particular people were I felt adverse to, but it was more of this kind of feeling of like, well, if only this wasn't happening right now, then I could, everything would be easy for me, and I'd be able to do what I needed to do. There wouldn't be any problems with my experience. And so that's finding sort of an external source for our peace rather than an internal source. So we're always kind of trying to learn that there's this internal source of peace that we can carry around with us no matter what the conditions are that we're experiencing. And as I was talking about in the meditation, what I was bringing to mind was having an inclusiveness. So rather than I'm just going to focus on what feels right for myself, which might be something that you're usually focused in on, could be your breath or whatever your particular meditation object is. It was more keeping a much more open quality to what your experience was. And this can be difficult because the mind often wants to pick and choose something. It wants to hone in, and it can kind of have a sense of closing, and that's the kind of experience I was encouraging you to look at while we were meditating. And what I'm speaking about in this talk is that sense of how we try to close off our experience. It's like, if you think of the friends that you keep, they're probably not people who are abusive to you or very difficult. And then even in friendships that are challenging, sometimes we don't want to spend too much with a challenging friend. So we try to pick those people that are easy for us. We try to pick experiences that are easy for us. And of course that makes a lot of sense. The Buddha even encourages that with skillful use of how we kind of, who it is, that we surround ourselves with, because we have to be very careful with that. But if we aren't looking towards points in our experience where there are times when we want to block something out, and instead look for that as a point of welcoming, then we're really missing out on our potential for a Dhamma practice. And so that would be kind of finding ourselves in uncomfortable situations. So like, for example, I was talking about right now how the Zoom was not working out for a moment, and then all of those things that started to come to mind, they're worthy of my bringing into my own heart, my sense of what is this like, And right now, Lumpur Sumedo is staying here. He's actually on our property across the street, so we don't see him too much. But just the sense of him being here, it brings up that quality. One of his main teachings is it's like this. And often we confuse our experiences when we're wanting it not to be like this. So we kind of have some sort of sense that it's not what we want. And then immediately what comes to mind is, well, if it was different, it would be better. So why can't it be better? And off the complaining mind goes, or some sort of difficulty, some sort of sense that it'll get better. At some point it'll get better, and then I'll be happy. And so it's always this sense of, or it can often be this sense of me somewhere else happy. It's just not possible to be happy right now. Because it's these conditions, these circumstances I find myself in that create the happiness for myself. And so that's a false perspective that we can carry around. And we do that with our preferences as well. I'd rather teach in the mornings rather than the evenings, or I'd rather have these particular monks that are in the monastery and not these other monks. And why can't I just have all of the new people who want to come to the monastery? Why can't they be easy to train, and why are they so difficult to train? And on it goes. It just is, again, we tend to focus on those conditions, on setting up whether we can be peaceful or not, or whether we can be happy. And so the Dhamma practice is really challenging us in a way. It's really challenging that perspective to a degree of having a sense that, well, this is really where you learn. You learn from welcoming these difficulties, because that's where peace actually arises. And that's very strange to kind of get as a concept. It can take a very long time. But sometimes you get it. Sometimes you're in a difficult conversation with someone, and then you remember, oh, right, I need to be focusing on my mind right now. And what's that experience in the body? What is the experience of I don't want, or I don't like? And so when that's present for us, then we say, oh, I don't actually have to give in to that preference. I can be with my own experience and find peace in that. So I don't know how many of you find that when you're in a difficult situation, but as soon as the awareness goes towards the body, there's peace there, even if there's pain, even if there's difficulty. Like think about a very difficult emotional time for yourself. The reference of the body really brings up that sense of, oh, I can be with this. Because those kind of thoughts or pushes away from our experience are what is causing that absence of peace. So that's the irony. We think, oh, if I just change the conditions, then I'll be peaceful. But it's rather, if I stop trying to think that I have to change the conditions, if I stop giving into that preference and going with that preference and exercising that preference, then actually there's another alternative. And that's to understand our own citta. And that's where the Buddha really talks about is desire being the the cause of dukkha, the cause of that sense of discontent or dis-ease. We're wanting something else. And because we want something else, we're not able to be with our own potential for peace. One of the ways that we can explore this is we kind of need to measure how much that we're able to take in any kind of given situation that we're in. So, for example, if we're meditating, we can kind of put ourselves in certain experiences or certain places or contexts where it's not sort of what we would choose to do. So maybe you have a room in your house where you feel very comfortable meditating, and instead you tell your roommate or your family members, I'm just going to meditate in the kitchen for a half hour or whatever. And you try that for a bit. Or you go outside and there's bugs around you, and there's mosquitoes, and then you get to see like, wow, I have some very strong aversion to mosquitoes. You might have not seen this, right? Because you were meditating in a very comfortable situation. Oftentimes during the what's called the rains, although there's no rains during the rains, it's the rainy season in India, but we follow the same monthly pattern of the rains here. So it's very dry, but it's quite hot in the monastery, and we will meditate up on the top of the mountain. So for some people, you have to walk pretty far up the hill. And this occurs at 5 a.m. and 7 p.m. And so there's all kinds of things that can be perturbing. It can get too hot, be very hot around 7 o'clock, sometimes as hot as 95, 100 degrees. Or when we're meditating in the morning, there's lots of mosquitoes. So there's the monks who are putting on different ointments or different ways that they can defend themselves against the mosquitoes, or others who are trying to tough it out, others who are suffering because they've created an identity around trying to tough it out. So there's all kinds of ways we suffer, but when we put ourselves in these conditions, then we see sometimes that we weren't seeing that we were hiding our own dukkha. We were keeping it at bay, and that can be a hindrance in our practice. So I just want to I'm trying to put a little bit of a plug into pushing ourselves with what it is that we shelter ourselves from, those kind of conditions or experiences. I didn't read this book, but I like the title of it. Ajahn Jeff had created a title of a book called Beyond Coping. And I can imagine what's in it, but it's probably different than what I'm imagining. But it's that sense that we sometimes have pursued our own Buddhist practice, our own Dhamma practice, in a way that I'm doing this to cope with my experience. So that it's almost a therapeutic approach. I'm going to heal myself, and I think behind that, what I have a sense of is coping is more like I'm going to put a Band-Aid over it. I'm going to have a way that I can just kind of put a Band-Aid over like a wound, but we might not recognize that there's still something festering underneath. There's something that we might not be recognizing. So it's not just we're not just trying to cope with the situation. We're actually trying to learn from it, and then move beyond it. So this is when we really learn, then we gain insight. But insights don't come from kind of necessarily keeping ourselves in the easiest of circumstances. So this would be something like maybe thinking about death more often, if that's a discomfort for someone. If people find that that's a difficulty. I was talking to someone the other day who was saying how he's been pursuing the Buddhist practice a while, but he finds the irony for him is that is that he's very afraid of death. So he doesn't like to think about it a lot, but he's drawn to the Buddhist religion, and yet what he fears is not being reborn. So he has this kind of sense that actually he does want to be reborn because he doesn't want to actually die. And he was telling me about his conundrum of this, because Nibbana really stops that process of rebirth. So he's having to work with this difficulty in his own practice. So that's just one topic that can be difficult. It can be all kinds of things that we might be challenging ourselves with. So that's, these are just some ideas, some kind of qualities you can bring up in your meditation. There are circumstances you can try to see where you might be holding back from putting yourselves in. And I just want to suggest to try to come to an edge. It doesn't mean that you have to dive into the deep end of the pool, but you can at least get into the pool rather than staying outside of it. So somebody might think, yeah, I'm just going to totally challenge myself. I'll just go sit in the middle of Ottawa, on some busy street, and that's not what I'm suggesting. Just kind of even the sidewalk might be a little bit too much. So just trying to find, a middle ground in terms of what challenges your meditation, what puts you in a condition where you might see, can I still find peace here? Even though I don't want to do this. It might even be, being around certain people, or calling up that person who's been wanting to speak with you and you've been thinking, I just do not want to have this conversation. And then you say, okay, how bad could it be? Am I going to die after the conversation? Well, maybe, but probably not. So, we're just thinking of ways that we can learn in our practice, and that's the focus of what we want to be really doing with our Dhamma and our understanding is that we're willing to learn, we're willing to look at, we're willing to see. So those are just some words for reflection, and whatever you've gained from that, please take it with you, and anything that hasn't been useful, please feel free to leave it behind.